When it comes to NHL rivalries, there's nothing that I love more in the game of hockey. And when you look at the intensity it brings between not just the fan base but the teams overall, how do you not love it? And as we all know, this 2020 NHL playoff is going to be insane, and we really should take a look at numerous cases where we could see some of the biggest rivalries in all of the NHL face off in this year's playoffs. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Tyler and I just do consistent content on all things relating hockey and the NHL overall. And yes, as you can see, I am discussing NHL rivalries today, and I will be discussing total 8 rivalries that, maybe we will see in this year's playoffs. I really hope that we see more of them than less for sure, because I love rivalries as an avid hockey fan and as a Rangers fan personally. There's nothing that I love more than rivalry hockey. I think it's just an amazing aspect to the game, of course, just not just for the fan base, for the teams overall. Gives them more incentive than say they normally would in say a normal regular season game. Even with plenty of teams that are way out of a playoff picture, but they really play above expectations against certain teams because of how much they dislike them. I love all that. But if you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe and like button if you like this kind of hockey content. Thank you all so much to people who have subbed and have been following me thus far. This is only the beginning of a lot of amazing and great things that happen on this channel. So like I said, make sure you hit that button if you're new here, if you enjoy this kind of hockey content. But without further ado, let's get into it with our first rivalry. Starting off, we have, yes, the Battle of Pennsylvania, the Pittsburgh Penguins versus the Philadelphia Flyers. One of the bloodiest rivalries, if I might add, in all of the NHL, and has been for easily the past decade plus. This year, though, the Penguins did edge out the Flyers in 3 games, winning 2 of those 3 in the regular season. And if you look at the past decade, they have played each other a couple times. In 2011-2012, in the conference finals, the Flyers, of course, won that series 4-2 against the Penguins. And then in 2017-2018, in that first round, the Penguins beat the Flyers 4-2. And if you look at their total playoff record, the Flyers do have one more win than the Penguins, 21-20 in all the matchups they played in the playoffs thus far. But this rivalry, I've experienced it firsthand, being around the fans of both the Penguins and the Flyers, and it is crazy just how much they go at each other, especially around playoff time. I would love nothing more, honestly, to see them go up in the playoffs. And look, as a Rangers fan, I'm not a fan of either team by any means, but I love seeing them go up against each other. It brings such a great mentality of the game, a seriousness like no other, truly, and it is really a bloodbath at times. And just seeing Crosby go up against Giroux and all the other strong players on the Flyers, it just goes neck and neck, and it just really is intense and something that is definitely worth watching. So I really hope that for this year's playoffs that we see this kind of rivalry, the Battle of PA, because it is easily, if not the best, one of the best rivalries in all of the NHL today. Next up, we have another huge rivalry, a really lopsided one, but hopefully that turns the tables sooner rather than later for the Maple Leafs case. But yes, we have the Maple Leafs against the Boston Bruins. We all know the story behind them. If you look at this year, of course, the Bruins had the upper hand in 3 games, winning 2 of those 3. And the playoffs, same thing, starting in 2013-2014. The conference quarterfinals, the Bruins won that round 4-3. Then 2017-2018, Boston won 4-3 in that first round. And then 2018-2019, Boston won that round again 4-3. And the Leafs fans, they want nothing more to not play the Boston Bruins, of course. But if they do win that qualifying round against the Columbus Blue Jackets, they will, of course, have to go up against Boston again. And I feel for the Leafs, in order to have a deep playoff run, you need to get through Boston. So it's a matter, can they do it? I think there's a chance. I don't necessarily know about this year, but I know that sooner rather than later it's going to happen. I just feel it. That's just my personal opinion, though. I could be completely wrong, but both of them have amazing rosters. The Leafs have one of the best offenses in all of the NHL, and the Boston Bruins, a very strong offense as well. The best line in the NHL, that first line, and the best overall team defense, and truly just amazing matchup between the two. Every single time they play, a very heated rivalry as well, and maybe it isn't as tough as maybe you'll see with the Penguins and the Flyers. It is still strong nonetheless, and I really love everything about it. And as you can see as well, Boston has a 2-win lead in their overall play against each other in the playoffs with 42 wins and then 40 wins for the Leafs, of course. But overall, I would love to see this round happen again, see if the Leafs can get past that first round. I really think that they will. It's just a matter of when at this point. But overall, this is a fantastic rivalry. We've all seen it before. We know Leafs fans are tired of losing in that first round, and rightfully so. And who knows what will happen this year. But for me personally, I would love nothing more to see them match up for a 3rd year in a row. I think that would be absolutely insane. Next up, we have arguably my favorite rivalry here, of course, and that is the Rangers versus the New York Islanders, the Battle of New York. And the Rangers did have the upper hand this year, winning 3 of the 4 games in the regular season. They've had no playoff series against each other within the past decade because the Islanders, of course, haven't really been relevant in the playoffs much for quite some time now, besides, just making it and losing that in that first round or just winning a round or two. But in general, they don't make the playoffs nearly as often as they really should, honestly. And if you look at their total playoff record, the Islanders do have one more win than the Rangers, 20-19. I will note that the Islanders, the last time they beat the Rangers in a playoff round was 1984, and the last time the Rangers beat the Islanders in a playoff round was 1994 when they won the Stanley Cup. That's crazy, really, but I love this rivalry, and look, I obviously don't like the Islanders, but I respect them a lot, and I love this rivalry more than anything. Every single time the Rangers roll into the Coliseum or the Islanders roll into MSG, it is like no other. It's an experience you have to witness for yourself. It is truly something that you can't even put into words. It is just that good. And even without the fans in attendance this year, seeing this rivalry come back in the playoffs for the first time in so long would really be amazing. I want nothing more than that, truly, and I know it would be heated as these teams definitely do not like each other at all. Next up, we have the Pittsburgh Penguins against the Washington Capitals. Probably one of the most star-studded series that you will see, of course, when they match up, because you have none other than Sidney Crosby versus Alexander Ovechkin and everyone else in between. Truly something amazing. And it's really been a rivalry since they first came in the NHL. But this year, especially, the Caps have had an upper hand with 2 wins of the 3 games against each other. And if you look back the past decade, starting 2015-2016, the Pens won in that second round against the Caps 4 games to 2. 2016-2017, the Pens won again in that second round, 4 games to 3 this time. And in 2017-2018, the Caps then won against the Pens 4 games to 2 in that second round. And in each of those years, whoever won that round won the Stanley Cup. So they were 2 of the best teams in the NHL during that span, and really still are today. I wouldn't want to go up against either of them in the playoffs, truly. And if you look at their total playoff record, the Penguins do have a slight edge, honestly, with 40 wins to 28 that the Capitals have. But this rivalry is really fantastic, one of the most star-studded, as I mentioned, with all the weapons that each team has. They give it their all every single time they play up against each other, and it is definitely more of a skill game when they play against each other than it is necessarily a bloodbath. Yes, they will fight at times, but it's different. It's just the skill level is truly off the charts between these two teams, and there's really nothing that I would love more to see them go up against each other in this year's playoffs. I would fully expect a best-of-7 series, and truly one where they give it all they possibly have. Next up, yes, if you're Oilers or Flames fan and you clicked on this video because of the thumbnail, we are talking about none other than the Battle of Alberta. One of the best rivalries in all the NHL, and while it has been quiet for quite some time, it has finally risen this year with plenty of crazy things that have happened. As we all know, the Flames did really dominate this year's series against the Oilers, winning 3 of those 4 games, but the last game they played against each other, I do believe the Oilers won that game and scored a whopping 8 goals. It was absolutely insane. They have no playoff series against each other within the 2010s because really throughout the 2000s, the Oilers and the Flames haven't had much of any playoff experience. But if you look at their total playoff record, the Oilers do edge them out 19-11, and that all goes hand in hand with the playoff series that they had back in the 80s. But if you look at them now, finally that rivalry has renewed with the likes, of course, just everyone going up against each other. Matthew Tkachuk, who you love to hate him type thing. If you're not a Flames fan, of course, with Zach Kassian, we all knew what happened there. And, of course, Tkachuk has had a history with other guys like Drew Doughty and others. But if you look at Kassian, he has a history as well, and everything in between. And the fact that there has been goalie fights like this between Mike Smith and Cam Talbot, that was amazing. I was watching that game live when it happened. It was crazy. But I love this rivalry so much, and seeing two teams that are really coming into their own back into the playoffs, if they were both to win their qualifying rounds, match up against each other in the playoffs would really be so fantastic for the game today, and I would love nothing more than it, truly, especially because I love watching the Battle of Alberta as it is. I enjoy watching the Oilers a lot, and I enjoy watching the Flames a lot. They are 2 really skilled teams, really fast teams as well, that have a lot to prove in this year's playoffs. So if they do make it and match up against each other, expect me and you should be watching that series as well. Next up, we have the Maple Leafs versus the Montreal Canadiens. This is a crazy series as well. One of, if not the best series in all of the NHL when it comes to rivalries, because of just how long it goes. Them both being original 6 teams, of course, playing against each other for the longest time, and really fantastic matchups between the two. If you look at this year, the Habs swept the Maple Leafs, which was ridiculous, but it's one of those things where while the Habs did have a very up and down year, they try to play to the best of their ability when it matters most. And when it matters most to them, especially, is when they go up against their Canadian rival, the Toronto Maple Leafs. But they also have no playoff experience against each other series-wise within the 2010s because they just haven't matched up, of course, with the Habs and Toronto. They have matched up in the past. That's why the Habs do have quite a lead, but we all know how good the Canadiens were for quite a while years ago with 42 wins to 29 wins that the Leafs had. But overall, they play against each other so hard-nosed and really skilled. It's so exciting to watch, too. They are such fast teams, especially on the Leafs side of things. And overall, this would be a huge series if the Habs could somehow beat the Pittsburgh Penguins in that qualifying round, advance to the playoffs, and then match up to the Leafs. That would be absolutely insane. And if it were to happen, I would be watching for sure because this rivalry has so much history, unlike others that you may see on this list, really going back decades upon decades upon decades. And really to see them match up possibly for whoever wins that round goes to the Stanley Cup, that would really be something crazy and would be great for the game of hockey, especially in Canada. Next up, we have the Blues versus the Blackhawks. Another great rivalry as well, which has really hit its peak within the past decade, at least from what I've witnessed. But the Blues dominated Chicago this year. As we all know, the Blackhawks have had a very up and down season, really not being consistent enough on that defense, especially the Blues winning 4 of the 4 games. But if you look at the 2010s playoffs, in 2013-2014 in the first round, the Chicago Blackhawks did beat the St. Louis Blues 4-2. And in 2015-2016, the Blues beat the Blackhawks in that first round 4-3. And if you look at their total playoff record, the Hawks do edge them out, not by a lot, but a decent amount, with 35 wins to St. Louis Blues 28. Another great rivalry with a lot of respect, because between Chicago and St. Louis overall, it doesn't matter if it's hockey, baseball, the same thing, whatever sport, they just have huge rivalries against each other with a lot of respect for each team. And I love that about that. I really do. It's a great battle in the West for sure. And really, every time they match up, you can expect a lot of great things to happen. And look, Chicago does have the odds against them with passing that qualifying round, deemed by many at least. But if they do it and face off against the St. Louis Blues at some time in the playoffs, that would be absolutely nuts. Because while the Blues definitely have the upper hand on paper, who knows what can happen with Chicago with, of course, Patrick Kane still being an amazing player in the league and riding on some younger guys in there, besides the likes of Jonathan Toews, of course. I don't know what's going to happen with the goalie situation with Corey Crawford, too. But regardless, if this were to happen, I would definitely be watching because every single time they go up against each other, it is definitely worth watching. And here we are, last but not least, we have the New York Rangers versus the Philadelphia Flyers. I've experienced this rivalry more than any, truly, because I've been to plenty of games in New York and Philly, and I've dealt with the brunt of, having backlash as a Rangers fan in Philly for sure, and I've witnessed Philly fans get the same backlash, similar at least in New York. It is really crazy. They do not like each other at all. I can tell you that right now. The fan bases do not like each other one bit, and this year the Flyers really dominated the Rangers. They won 3 of the 3 games against them, with, of course, the Rangers' former head coach, now the new head coach of the Flyers, Alain Vigneault. But if you look at the 2010 playoffs, in 2013-2014, the Rangers won in that first round against them 4-3, and that was a crazy series. I remember it like it was yesterday, and it's funny that I bring this up because back in the day, I was in middle school when that series actually happened, and I did a bet with my teacher because he was a diehard Flyers fan. I'm a diehard Rangers fan, and if the Flyers won that series, I had to wear his Flyers jersey all day, and if the Rangers won that series, he had to congratulate me and just gas up the Rangers all day long with a smile on his face, and lo and behold, that's exactly what happened, and he just a lot of respect for each other. I have plenty of friends that are Flyers fans and Rangers fans, and overall, I love everything about this rivalry. It just has so much intensity to it, and while they haven't played each other in the playoffs that much in recent years, it doesn't change just how heated they are every single time they go up against each other, especially in the regular season. And the Flyers do have an edge with 30 wins to 24 the Rangers have in total playoff games against each other. But without further ado, let's get to the conclusion of this video. And that is going to conclude this video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this kind of hockey content, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Like I said, I would really appreciate it. This is only the beginning of a lot of amazing and great things that happen here on this channel. And I thank you all who have been watching thus far. I really appreciate it. But if you're new here, make sure that you also check out my videos down here below if you haven't seen them. And comment down below also who you think is the best rivalry that you would love to see in this year's playoffs. Or if there's different rivalries that I say didn't mention and you would like to add, please let me know in the comments below. There are plenty of great rivalries in the NHL, and I understand that this is a little bit more opinion-based too, so I perfectly understand the argument if people believe that certain rivalries are higher than others that say I didn't mention. But let me know all that in the comments below. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you all again so much, guys, and I'll be back in a day or two.